All right. So if you go back into the notes from earlier this semester, you scroll before the graph of the economy, you scroll before the money market and global funds market graphs, you find the circular flow. At this point, this is probably messier than what you have. Which doesn't speak so well for me, but hopefully it speaks well for you. Okay? Now the reason I'm having you do the circular flow is because I want you to focus for a change on the money. Usually when we talk about what's being bought, whether it's the government buying goods and services, the government buying resources, households buying goods and services, what do companies buy? Resources, correct? In the resources market. We focus on what gets bought, not necessarily the money that's exchanged in the result of that purchase, okay? But we're going to come back to this in a little bit when we talk about the balance of payments, because that's what balance of payments tracks, particularly on the outside here, okay? These money arrows that don't look so good in my diagram, but they look fine in your diagrams, okay? In exchange for the M, the import, there's money going out. In exchange for the export, there's money coming in. We want to look at tracking in more detail all the money. It's kind of like that old cliche, follow the money. Okay, follow the money. That's what the balance of payments is. So think about the money that goes out of a country and comes into a country when you're thinking about the balance of payments, and that's in chapter 31. So now, you've had homework based on this. We've talked about it briefly, but I want to go over this again. The balance of payments splits up into a couple of accounts. When you think about trade and tracking trade and the payment as a result of trade between countries, most of the time, what you're thinking about is merchandise only. Exports and imports of stuff. A lot of times we don't think about services, though. We don't think about other kinds of transactions that are a reason for money to flow in and out of countries, back and forth from countries. But if you're thinking about the normal trade deficit that we have, for instance, that's in the current account. Okay? So for me, this is on page 676. And for you, I think it's close to 700, but there's an actual chart with numbers. What page is that for you guys in the newer edition? 710? Okay, go to 710 then. Check it out. Perfect. All right. This is a simplified version of the balance of payments. Okay? The current account tracks all the payments in exchange for the sale of goods, the sale of services, and net unilateral transfers abroad. Now, the important thing here is, how do you come up with a positive or negative number? Okay? If you've never done banking on your own because you don't have a bank account, this might take a few minutes to sink in, but it's not that complicated. You need to know the difference between debits and credits. Debits and credits. What's a debit? Well, let's try to simplify it even further. A debit is money coming out of your account or money coming into your account. Let's say you had one account and only two things could happen, debits or credits. Money coming out, all right? So think of a debit. If you were going to have a debit card and you were going to go someplace and pay with a debit card, raise your hand if you have a debit card, all right? What happens when you use a debit card? It takes money out of your account. So that would be a positive or a negative number, a debit? A negative number, right? Now, let's say you have one big overall account and you have credit that comes to that account. Is that a positive or a negative? That's a positive number. You have to be careful when it comes to credit cards, for instance, in today's world. Right? But in terms of just tracking the numbers, the important thing is right now to just focus on it. Is it a positive or a negative number? A credit is a positive number. What happens when you get a credit card? You're being loaned money. You're being given money at a price by a bank, for instance. You have a Chase credit card. Anybody have a credit card? All right, what company is it with? So, oh, it's American Express. Okay. What about you? Visa. All right. And there's usually a bank that backs that Visa, that MasterCard. Of course, you can have American Express. So what happens when you charge something or you have a credit through your credit card? That's somebody saying, fine, we'll take care of it. Money is coming into your account to cover that purchase. So just understand that, okay? The difference between debits and credits. Debits are negatives, credits are positives. So let's say you're a country. You're not Connor, you're not Ben, you're a country. And you sell something to someone else. Somebody in your country sells iPhones to people in Asia, another country in Asia. Well, they're going to buy with the currency that they have. Is that going to be a debit or a credit for you? Which way is money coming? Is it coming to you if you're American as a result of selling those iPhones? Yes. So that's a debit or a credit? That's a credit. Money's coming to you, right? So let's get some money real quick to visualize this. Here's some money. Here's some people in Asia. Pretend they already have some money. Here's my iPhone. I'm Steve Jobs. These things are like hotcakes. I only got one left, but well, let's pretend I have three. And I am going to send this to Asia in exchange for money. All right? So there. Give me some money. Which way is money flowing? Is it flowing into the United States or outside? If it's flowing into the United States, because that's what's happening. You guys are Asians. I'm American. All right? It flowed into my country. That's called a financial capital inflow. And if it's flowing in, then that's a debit or a credit? Credit. That's a credit. Correct. It's a credit. It's a positive number. All right? Now, if I happen to be walking around with money and somebody from Asia sells me something, not an iPhone, but anything they're wearing probably. Let's say that I'm going to buy some shoes, and I say, thank you very much for those shoes, I need some, and we purchase those. That's a capital outflow. Financial capital is flowing out of our country, and if we're looking at our country's balance of payments, that is a credit or a debit? That's a debit. Okay? So that's how that works. Now, before we get back to chapter 31, go to another page in your notes and copy this. Let's stick with the Chinese example. We'll go back to currency. Remember we talked about the different things that can influence currency? Let's say you got the US on one side, you got China on the other side, and the Chinese currency is the yuan. American currency is the dollar. What would the foreign exchange markets look like? Victor, what would I draw over here besides supply and demand? We have an equilibrium point, right? And that's known as, how are we going to label that in the U.S.? That's right, the price of the dollar or the yuan? Price of the dollar. Very good. And that's what you can label this axis, right? The price of the dollar in yuan. Because it's all about comparing. If it was US and Mexico, that'd be the price of the dollar in pesos, right? Now, what do we label this down here? Kathy, quantity of dollars or quantity of money. Sure, quantity of dollars. All right, now over here, in China, what do we label this axis? Haley? At the top.
Price of yuan.
That's right. That's right, price of yuan in dollars. What about the bottom, Haley?
Quantity of yuan.
So this all needs to be in your notes. And what we said is, even though this isn't realistic, when you're talking about an increase or a decrease in the price of these currencies compared to each other, you're talking about an appreciation or a depreciation, same thing, right? The banks are actually located in these countries, whether it's an actual bank or it's a place to exchange it at the airport. To help you with these problems, you want to visualize a bank that's in the middle of the ocean that's not really associated with any one country. It's not physically located, even though it is, right? Remember we said the best way to think about what's going to happen in each of these currencies is which way currency is going to flow. So There were factors in your book. What were the factors in your book in this chapter that could influence the flow of currency?
Income,
Real interest rates,
interest,
inflation,
income levels.
and income levels. That's right. Income levels. And it's all about comparing the two. Right? So let's say real interest rates down there. If real interest rates go up faster in the United States than in China, which way is money going to flow? It's going to flow. No, it goes up faster in the United States. To the U.S.
So that means that the U.S. is going to appreciate.
So, right. Money's going to flow from China to the United States. So in other words, the Chinese yuan is going to have to increase the supply of yuan in this bank so that it can be traded out for dollars. And that means supply is going to shift to the right for the yuan, and demand for the dollar is going to shift to the right. And that means then that what is going to happen to the value of the Chinese currency? It's going to decrease or depreciate. What's going to happen to the value or the price of the dollar? It's going to increase or appreciate. And so as long as you know which way money is flowing, you can always figure out what's going to happen to the value of the currencies, right? What about inflation? What if prices go up faster in China than they do in the United States?
The dollar appreciates.
That's right. Because it got too expensive to buy stuff in China. If you're an American, it's easier to find a deal in the United States. Same thing would happen, right? What about income levels? What would I need to happen with income levels for the same thing to still happen? For the supply of the yuan to shift right and the demand for the dollar to shift right. That's right. We need incomes in China to go up faster than the United States. Because now those people, as part of your circular flow, right, they're buyers of our stuff. They'll buy even more, right? Because they have more money. But they can't buy it in yuan, right? If I'm selling iPhones, I'm not going to take that. I live in the United States. I want dollars. So they're going to have to trade out their yuan, their currency, for dollars in order to make that purchase. But they'll gladly do so because times are good in China. Incomes are going up faster there than they are in the United States. Okay? So if you wanted this scenario, and it doesn't matter what the name of the countries are, perhaps in your notes what you can do is write down these three factors. And you can remind yourself that for real interest rates in this example, the U.S. needs to go up faster for this to happen. Inflation, China, their price level needs to go up faster than the U.S. And for income levels, China needs to go up faster. Now, if you want the opposite, then that has to be the opposite. I'm not going to redraw everything, all right? But if you wanted instead for money to flow from the U.S. to China, you need all the opposites of these things, right? You need real interest rates to go up faster in China. You would need inflation to go up faster in the U.S. You would need income levels to go up faster in the U.S. And then all the reverse happens, okay? But this is the key piece I want to draw to your attention, this flowing, okay? Because that's what gets tracked in the balance of payments. That's what gets tracked in the balance of payments. And if you're looking at page 410, all right, all of that stuff in the current account refers to that, as well as the capital account, okay? Now in your book or in your notes, next, instead of capital account, here's another synonym, financial account. So write that down because I can't tell you, just like with these other things we've had this semester, which term is going to appear on the AP exam, all right? If you're used to using expenditures as your word on your circular flow, but they say outlays, well, you know those are the same thing because in your notes you've got a synonym section. You've got a thesaurus section, right? Same thing with financial account or capital account. And the capital account refers to financial capital. But see how in your book it says outflow of U.S. capital, inflow of foreign capital? That's what we were just drawing with this diagram, okay? There's financial capital flowing. What would this be an example of for China? Would this be a capital outflow or a capital inflow for China? Capital, financial capital flows out of the country. What about for the U.S.? Would this be a capital inflow or a capital outflow? Capital inflow for the United States. So capital inflow, is that going to be a debit or a credit for the United States?
Credit.
It's a credit. What about for China?
Debit.
That's a debit. Exactly. Good. All right, stand up and stretch your legs for 2 minutes. We'll finish up with some questions.